I lowered my voice, growling each word like a stern warning aimed directly at the shallow mind of this hypocritical ex-sister-in-law. It doesn't matter where the money came from. Right now, your mother and your brother are saddled with a $250,000 debt. As their daughter, and as a direct beneficiary of that borrowed money, don't think you can stand on the sidelines and play the innocent princess. I'm warning you, Ethan can't even take care of himself right now. Sooner or later, the creditors will find their way to your luxury condo to collect what your mother owes. If you truly care about your family, sell your handbags, sell your designer shoes, and sell that condo to save your mother and brother. Stop calling and bothering me. I don't have a single spare cent for your shameless family. I hit the end call button. Immediately after, I deleted Jess's number and blocked all of her social media accounts. The ramen on the table had gone cold, but it tasted delicious. The masks of that family were falling off one by one when their core interest money was threatened. I knew my warning would give Jess sleepless nights. Someone so used to a life of indulgence and selfishness would never sell her own assets to save her mother or brother. Their family would soon turn on each other under the crushing pressure of money. My only job now was to watch the show from the sidelines and protect my new life. Early that afternoon, while I was busy designing a logo for my portfolio, I received a flood of messages from old friends and close colleagues. My phone buzzed incessantly despite being on silent mode. I frowned and opened my messages to see what was happening. A college friend sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post with a worried message. "Grace, you need to get online right now. Ethan is posting all this horrible stuff about you on Facebook. He's tagging all our mutual friends to publicly humiliate you." My heart skipped a beat. I quickly opened my social media. Sure enough, a long, rambling post from Ethan was the first thing I saw, attracting hundreds of likes and comments in just 2 hours. In the post, Ethan played the part of a pitiful man, a devoted husband who was cheated on and scammed by his wife. He used heart-wrenching language to paint me as a cruel, money-hungry woman. He fabricated stories about me secretly funneling assets to my family. He claimed that when I saw his family's business fail and his mother fall ill, I immediately set a trap, forcing him to sign the debt papers before running away. In the comments section, many people who didn't know the full story were piling on, cursing me with incredibly harsh words. They called me a backstabbing, heartless woman and advised Ethan to report me to the police. Reading those deceitful words, a furious rage erupted inside me. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Ethan had pushed me into a corner. He wanted to use the pressure of public opinion to suffocate me, to make it impossible for me to hold my head up in this society. But he was wrong. The Grace of today was not the submissive, long-suffering woman of the past. I took a deep breath, telling myself to keep a cool head. Fighting with petty people, crying, or cursing wouldn't solve anything. Only hard evidence was the most powerful weapon. I opened a drawer and took out an external hard drive containing all the crucial data I had been quietly collecting for months. Ever since I started suspecting Ethan's fidelity, I had been preparing. I opened a folder named Evidence and carefully selected the clearest images. First was a collection of screenshots of bank transfers from my account to Brenda's. Each transfer of $1,000, $1,500, payments for medical bills, utility bills, totaling nearly $40,000 over 5 years. Everything was clearly dated. Next were screenshots of Brenda's shameless text messages demanding money, accompanied by threats to slander my parents if I didn't send her allowance on time. Finally, the knockout blow. I uploaded a screen-recorded video with audio. It was a recording I had secretly made the night I confronted Ethan about his mother's debt. In the recording, Ethan's voice was crystal clear, admitting that his mother was involved in a pyramid scheme and that he was deliberately covering it up, trying to force me to take on the debt to protect assets for his mistress, Tiffany. I combined all this evidence into a single post. I didn't write a long, rambling story like Ethan. I wrote a short, sharp, and direct statement to Ethan and anyone interested in our divorce story. The truth cannot be hidden by cheap lies. For 5 years as a daughter-in-law, I contributed my entire income, transferring nearly $40,000 to my ex-mother-in-law. The attached bank statements prove this. I filed for divorce after discovering my husband's infidelity and his plot to hide assets to force me to take on a $250,000 debt his mother incurred from a pyramid scheme. Ethan voluntarily signed the divorce agreement to protect his mistress. All evidence, including text messages and audio recordings, is made public here. I demand that Ethan immediately cease his defamatory actions. If this continues, I will take this entire file to the authorities to clarify the charges of forgery and accessory to fraud against his family. I carefully tagged Ethan and every mutual friend who had left a scornful comment on his post. My finger decisively hit post. Just 15 minutes later, the tide on social media turned dramatically. My post, with its irrefutable evidence, was like a bomb dropped in a quiet lake. Acquaintances started sharing the audio recording. The comments cursing me vanished, replaced by a wave of outrage directed at Ethan and his family. People began to criticize the despicable, cowardly behavior of a man who cheated on his wife and the bottomless greed of his mother. My phone buzzed with apology messages from friends who had misunderstood. Ethan himself, after seeing my post, was so terrified that he quickly deactivated his Facebook profile to escape the public backlash. My perfect counterattack had completely shattered my ex-husband's smear campaign. I smiled and closed my laptop. The noise on social media no longer concerned me. I took out my only presentable work outfit and carefully ironed out every wrinkle. Tomorrow, I had an interview for a design team lead position at a major media company. Leaving the wreckage of my former family behind, I was focusing all my energy on rebuilding my career and my own bright future. The interview went more smoothly than I had hoped. My extensive experience and a newfound confidence after shedding the burden of my marriage helped me easily convince the new company's management. I was hired to start the following week with a very attractive starting salary. In high spirits, I stopped by the market to buy a small piece of salmon, planning to cook a nice meal to celebrate. As I reached the door of my apartment, I froze. Waiting for me was a strange man. He wore a cheap black suit, thick-rimmed glasses, and carried a worn leather briefcase. His thin face and sharp, scrutinizing eyes made me feel uneasy. Seeing me approach, he immediately flashed a synthetic smile and spoke first. "Hello, Miss Grace. I'm Mark, a legal representative for a private lending firm. I'm sure you know why I'm here. It took some effort to track down your new address. My heart beat a little faster, but I maintained a calm and cold demeanor. I didn't open my door but stood with my arms crossed in the hallway, looking him straight in the eye. Hello, I don't have any loans with your company. If you're looking for my ex-husband, Ethan, you've come to the wrong place. We are officially divorced. I have nothing to do with him or his family's debts." The man named Mark pushed up his glasses, using a patronizing tone intended to manipulate. "Miss Grace, I understand you're divorced, but according to our records, most of the money Brenda borrowed was during your marriage to her son. Besides, in our culture, a marriage, even a past one, creates certain moral obligations. Ethan is currently unable to pay and is in hiding. You, on the other hand, have a stable job. I advise you, for the sake of your own reputation and basic human decency, to step up and help your ex-husband. We can consider restructuring the debt if you show good faith by making a payment. If not, and this gets messy, it won't look good if your new employer finds out." I laughed, a sarcastic laugh for the shamelessness of this hired debt collector. He was trying to use emotional blackmail and threats to my reputation to force a woman with nothing to pay the debts of the man who betrayed her. How ridiculous. Mr. Mark, since you work in the legal field, you should speak in terms of the law, not appeal to my emotions or culture to intimidate me. First, that debt was taken out by Brenda for her own personal use, not for our household expenses. Second, in the legally binding divorce decree, Ethan voluntarily assumed full responsibility for that debt. It's all there in black and white. Legally, I am completely in the clear and have no obligation to pay your company anything. Seeing his reasoning was getting him nowhere, the man's attitude changed. his voice becoming sharper and more threatening. Don't be clever. The law is one thing, but the world works in its own way. We have methods to collect our debts. Don't think that piece of paper will let you sleep peacefully at night. If you don't cooperate, don't blame us for using stronger measures. My eyes turned icy. I took a step forward, speaking directly and firmly to the man trying to intimidate me. Listen to me carefully. I am a law-abiding citizen. Any action by your company to harass or threaten my personal life will be immediately reported to the local police for extortion and illegal trespassing. This apartment hallway has a security camera. I suggest you leave now and go find the person who actually has your money. Please go. I need to rest. Completely deflated, the debt collector glanced nervously at the camera on the corner of the wall. He muttered a few curses under his breath, grabbed his briefcase, and quickly walked down the stairs. Watching him disappear, I finally let out a sigh of relief, a cold sweat on my back. I knew this wasn't over. Ethan's family had created too big of a mess, and these kinds of collectors don't give up easily. The fact that this man found my new apartment meant Ethan had deliberately given them my information, hoping to find someone else to take the fall. Stepping inside and locking the door securely, the first thing I did was call Mr. Miller, the lawyer who had represented me in the divorce. Mr. Miller, I apologize for bothering you at this hour, but a debt collection agency just came to my home to threaten me. I would like to officially authorize your law firm to handle all legal issues related to my ex-husband's family debt from now on. Anyone who comes to harass me will be directed to speak with my lawyer. Mr. Miller's calm, professional voice on the other end gave me some peace of mind. He agreed to take the case and instructed me on how to collect evidence if I was threatened again. After hanging up, I leaned against the door, my eyes fixed on the clear blue sky outside the window. A storm was brewing, but I now had the weapons and shields to protect myself. I would not let anyone trample on the peaceful life I had fought for with blood, sweat, and tears. Life at the new media company was peaceful and busy. A constant stream of design projects kept me from dwelling on the dark corners of my failed marriage. My new colleagues were friendly and welcoming. They judged me by my work, not my past. That Friday afternoon, just after receiving my first paycheck and planning to buy some new clothes, a call from an unknown landline number ruined everything. The caller identified himself as an officer from the Community Mediation Board in the district where my ex-in-laws lived. In a monotone voice, the officer requested my presence at the mediation office next Monday morning. The reason given was that Brenda had filed a formal complaint, accusing me of a serious breach of family ethics. In the complaint, she tearfully claimed I was a disobedient daughter-in-law who had treated her cruelly. She falsely accused me of provoking her, causing a relapse of her heart condition that left her bedridden for days. Her demands in the complaint were laughable. She wanted me to pay all her medical bills, compensate her for emotional distress, and, most importantly, resume the $1,500 monthly payments so she could recover in peace. After hanging up, I sat stunned in my office chair. A feeling of disgust rose in my throat. I couldn't believe human greed and shamelessness could sink to such depths. She was drowning in debt, her family on the brink of collapse due to her own avarice. Yet she still had the audacity to stage this pathetic drama to squeeze the last few dollars from someone who was no longer her family. But the anger lasted only a few minutes, replaced by a cold, clear-headed resolve. I knew that backing down now would be digging my own grave. On Saturday morning, I took my entire file of documents, messages, recordings, and related evidence to Mr. Miller's office. The room was filled with natural light, and the orderly oak bookshelves filled with law books gave me a sense of absolute security. Mr. Miller carefully examined every medical document that an acquaintance at the hospital had copied for me. He cross-referenced them with the electronic receipts I had accidentally collected from the shared family email account before I moved out. Mr. Miller pushed up his glasses and looked at me with admiration, praising my meticulous preparation and foresight. He explained that legally, the Community Mediation Board had no power to force anyone to pay money or compensation without a court order. This meeting was purely for civil mediation, to encourage the parties to reach an agreement. However, Brenda wanted to use the pressure of local authorities and older community leaders who valued traditional ethics to manipulate me psychologically. She wanted to shame me in front of respected community members, hoping I would pay up out of embarrassment. We spent the morning devising a perfect counter-strategy. Mr. Miller coached me on how to control my emotions when faced with her crocodile tears. He stressed that I must not lose my temper, curse, or raise my voice, as that would make me look bad in front of the mediators. My only and most powerful weapon was the truth, backed by hard evidence. The night before the mediation, I ironed a modest and professional outfit. I double-checked every document, arranged them chronologically, stapled them neatly, and placed them in a black leather portfolio. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a completely different Grace, no longer the timid daughter-in-law who bowed her head and obeyed every baseless scolding from her mother-in-law. The Grace of today was an independent, self-reliant woman, ready to crush anyone who dared to use false morality to trample on her dignity. I turned off the lights and went to bed early, preparing myself mentally for the battle ahead. Brenda had started this play, but I would be the one to bring down the curtain. At exactly 8 a.m. on Monday, I walked into the local municipal building with Mr. Miller. The mediation room was on the second floor, a spacious room with a large, oval-shaped particle board table. When we entered, the full cast of my former family was already seated on the other side. Brenda sat with her head down, her face powdered to a pale pallor, a pain relief patch on her forehead. She wore a drab, brown silk outfit, deliberately creating the image of a frail, sickly old woman. Standing beside her was Jess, her precious daughter, constantly rubbing her mother's back and dabbing her with menthol oil, her face a mask of concern. Across from them sat the neighborhood leader, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man with a stern face, and Miss Davis, a representative from the Women's Committee, holding a notepad and pen. Seeing me enter, Brenda immediately let out a series of dry, theatrical coughs that echoed in the quiet room. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, signaling for everyone to settle down. He began the session with a long speech about family traditions, neighborly values, and the duties of children. Then, he invited Brenda to present her complaint. On cue, Brenda burst into tears. Tears streamed from her wrinkled eyes, combined with a trembling voice, creating a heart-wrenching scene. She rambled on about how I was a cold-hearted daughter-in-law. She claimed I had been secretly sending money to my own family. When she saw our family facing financial difficulties, I had callously divorced her son, abandoning my sick mother-in-law with no one to care for her. She even loudly accused me of verbally abusing her over the phone, causing her so much distress that her blood pressure skyrocketed, forcing her to be hospitalized for several days. At the end of her tearful performance, she pointed at me, demanding that the officials restore justice for her, forcing me to pay her medical bills and resume the monthly allowance. Miss Davis from the Women's Committee sighed softly, her gaze toward me now filled with reproach. Mr. Thompson turned to me, his tone severe, demanding an explanation for the unethical behavior Brenda had just described. I calmly stood up, smiled politely at the officials, and opened my portfolio. I took out the first set of documents, neatly arranged in a clear plastic sleeve. Mr. Thompson, Miss Davis, I understand and respect the values our community upholds. However, all accusations require evidence. Brenda just claimed that I provoked her to the point of being hospitalized for a recurring heart condition. I would like to submit to the mediation board Brenda's official medical records from the day she was admitted to the hospital. I walked over and placed the copy of the medical records, stamped with the hospital's official seal, on the table in front of Mr. Thompson. The neighborhood leader picked them up and scanned them, his eyebrows furrowing. I read the key findings aloud for everyone to hear. The patient was admitted with symptoms of abdominal pain and dizziness. The gastroenterologist's conclusion clearly states, the patient is suffering from acute indigestion due to the consumption of a large amount of rich, hard-to-digest food, specifically, an excessive amount of fresh seafood. This is accompanied by mild hypertension due to high cholesterol. The cause is a diet high in fat. There are absolutely no signs of cardiovascular disease or physical weakness resulting from emotional shock. The room fell silent. Brenda's sobs abruptly stopped. The pain relief patch on her forehead looked as if it was about to fall off. Jess awkwardly put down the bottle of menthol oil, her eyes avoiding everyone. But I wasn't finished. I took out the second set of documents. Brenda claims that she has been bedridden and sick, and her family is in dire straits with no money for medicine. Mr. Thompson, here are the credit card statements for her family. On the Tuesday, right after she was discharged from the hospital, Brenda went to a high-end spa on Michigan Avenue for a 2-4 karat gold facial treatment costing $900. The next day, she swiped her card to buy 3 boxes of premium Korean ginseng worth over $1,000 at a luxury mall. Can a person on their deathbed, a person being financially ruined by their daughter-in-law, have the energy and money to go for beauty treatments and luxury shopping? Mr. Thompson slammed the file on the table, his face flushing with anger as he realized he had been played by an old woman. Miss, Davis shook her head in disgust, her gaze shifting from reproachful of me to contemptuous of Brenda. The greedy mother-in-law's victim act was mercilessly exposed in the light of truth. Brenda's mouth hung open, speechless, her face now genuinely pale. She didn't need makeup to look like someone having a real heart attack. A suffocating silence filled the mediation room. Mr. Thompson, his face grim, spoke with authority, directing his words at Brenda. The neighborhood leader harshly criticized her for abusing the trust of the authorities and lying about her health to slander another citizen. Brenda hung her head, her hands clenched together and trembling, all traces of her usual arrogance gone. Jess was furtively texting on her phone, a look of utter panic on her face. Just as Mr. Thompson was about to declare the meeting over and dismiss the complaint, the door burst open with a loud bang. Everyone startled and turned around. Standing in the doorway was Ethan. The image of the dapper project manager, always in expensive suits with perfectly styled hair, was gone. In his place was a pathetic, disheveled man. His hair was a mess. His shirt was wrinkled and unbuttoned at the top, revealing a sweaty chest. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was breathing heavily like a cornered animal. The moment he saw me, Ethan lunged forward, ignoring the presence of the officials. "Grace, you goddamn bitch. What the hell did you do? Are you trying to kill me and Tiffany?" Mr. Thompson shot up from his chair, slamming his hand on the table and yelling at Ethan to maintain order. But Ethan seemed to have lost his mind, brushing off the warning and continuing to scream, pointing at me. A dozen tattooed thugs just showed up at Tiffany's media company and threw buckets of paint and filth all over the entrance. They used a bullhorn to scream my name and hers all over the neighborhood. Her company's board immediately fired her for damaging the company's image. I was also suspended by my director, pending an investigation into my debts. Are you satisfied now? You've pushed us to our deaths. Now sign the damn papers and take this debt back. Looking at the frenzied state of the man who was once my husband, I felt no fear, not even a shred of pity. I only found his stupidity and cowardice laughable. He had the nerve to act, but not the courage to face the consequences. When the fallout came, he sought to blame the woman he had betrayed. I motioned for Mr. Miller to stay seated and took a step forward, facing Ethan directly. I pulled a thick stack of papers from my portfolio and threw them onto the table. The sharp sound made Ethan flinch. "Ethan, open your eyes and look closely. These are the detailed statements of every single dollar I bit my tongue and sacrificed for, scrimping on food and clothes to transfer to your mother for the last 5 years. Almost $40,000. $40,000 of my blood, sweat, and tears to feed your mother's lavish lifestyle, to provide for this family's meals and medicine. And what about you? You used our joint savings to buy designer bags for your mistress, Tiffany. You brought her into our marital bed while I was working overtime until my eyes burned. You conspired with your mother to trick me, to leave me with nothing so you could enjoy your freedom." I took a deep breath, my voice hardening, each word as sharp as a knife. "Now that your karma has come, Now that the debt collectors are at your workplace, you show up here demanding I take the fall. That $250,000 debt was caused by your mother. You are the one who voluntarily signed the document accepting responsibility in front of a judge. It's in black and white, with the court's official seal. What right, what authority do you have to force me to bear the consequences of your family's greed and depravity? Let me make this clear. From this moment on, if you or anyone in your family comes near where I live or calls to harass me, I will immediately file a police report for threats and psychological terrorism. Mr. Thompson and Miss Davis heard every word. They looked at Ethan with utter disgust. Mr. Thompson walked over, pointed to the door, and loudly demanded that Ethan and his family leave the building immediately. The mediation ended in a spectacular failure for my ex-mother-in-law's family. I smiled, thanked the officials, and Mr. Miller, and walked out of that suffocating room with my head held high, leaving behind the sound of Brenda screaming at her foolish son. The battle at the municipal building completely shattered any last illusions Ethan's family had about making me their scapegoat. A week passed in peace, and I thought the matter was finally closed. I started decorating my small apartment, buying a few potted plants for the windowsill and cooking myself nice meals. But the storm from that rotten family had not yet finished with the people around them. One midweek evening, a heavy rain poured down. I had just finished dinner when I heard frantic, urgent knocking at the door. Peeking through the window, I was stunned to see who was standing under the shabby awning of the apartment complex. It was Tiffany, the young mistress Ethan had gone to such lengths to protect. She looked nothing like the trendy, stylish young woman with a Dior bag and bright red lipstick I had seen in their secret dating photos. Tiffany looked as pathetic as Ethan had a few days prior. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her pale, makeup-free face. Her expensive designer dress was splattered with mud. The moment I opened the door, her legs seemed to give out, and she collapsed onto the cold tile floor. "Grace, I'm begging you. I'm on my knees. Please save Ethan. If you don't, he's going to rot in jail." I took a step back, crossing my arms, my eyes cold as I looked down at the weeping woman at my feet. I didn't invite her in, nor did I have any intention of helping her up. "Tiffany, you've come to the wrong place. I'm not the police, and I'm not a savior. Whatever happened to your man, your lover, is your problem to solve. Don't bring your troubles to my door." Tiffany shook her head violently, her hands gripping the doorframe, tears and snot smearing her face. She began to stammer out her story, her voice broken with fear. Through her panicked confession, I finally understood the true severity of the disaster Brenda's family had created. It was far more than a simple civil debt. It turned out the investment company Brenda had poured all her assets into wasn't just a failed MLM. It was a massive, large-scale, fraudulent enterprise that had just been busted by the FBI. Brenda wasn't just a victim. Driven by greed for commissions, she had become a key player, luring elderly relatives from her hometown to invest. But the worst part was Ethan himself. To help his mother secure huge loans from predatory lenders and banks, Ethan, with his experience as a project manager, had used his professional skills to forge a series of documents. He had forged income statements and company seals to create flawless loan applications for Brenda. This afternoon, the Economic Crimes Division had raided their home and arrested Ethan for investigation into forgery of official documents and conspiracy to commit fraud. Grace, Ethan's been arrested. The police said his crimes are very serious, involving millions of dollars. When Brenda heard the news, she fainted. She's in the emergency room now. I don't know who to turn to. And the loan sharks are after me, trying to seize the condo we're still paying for. Tiffany looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes and made a suggestion so repulsive it made me sick. "Please, go to the police and give a statement for us. Just say that during your marriage, you were the one who managed all the finances. Say that the forgery was something you accidentally pressured him into because of financial stress. Or just take part of the blame to lighten his sentence. You have experience with paperwork. You'll know how to find a loophole. I promise, after Ethan gets out, we'll work to pay you back. I'll be indebted to you for life." I was frozen for a few seconds. I truly could not believe that a woman with such a warped and despicable mindset could exist. She was encouraging me to commit perjury, to take the fall for the man who betrayed me, just to save her own future and that of her pathetic lover. The rain outside seemed to fall even harder. Thunder rumbled across the Chicago night sky. I stood on the top step, looking down at her bowed head. All the injustice, all the pain of my lost youth, suddenly transformed into an invisible strength, making my mind incredibly clear and sharp. I didn't scream or shout. I just used a steady, steely voice that was sharp enough to pierce through her selfish shell. Tiffany, open your eyes and look at me. Do you think this Grace is some fool you can so easily manipulate? I took a step back, pointing a finger directly at her face. When you were secretly taking off your clothes and sleeping with a married man in the very bed I worked hard to buy, did you ever think about decency? When you were carrying expensive designer bags and going on vacations with the money Ethan stole from our joint account, did your conscience bother you at all? You gleefully reaped the rewards of my labor, played the victor, and pushed me out onto the street with nothing. Now that your man has broken the law and is facing prison, you crawl to my feet and beg me to go to jail for him. Don't you find the words coming out of your mouth utterly filthy and disgusting? Tiffany bit her lip, her face contorting as she was exposed. She still tried to argue with the desperate logic of a cornered animal. But Grace, you used to love him. You don't have a family to tie you down. You could go to jail for a few years and still start over. I'm still young. I can't lose my future. If Ethan goes to prison, the creditors will kill me. I burst out laughing, a scornful sound that drowned out the rain. The selfishness of the other woman had reached a pathological level. That was your choice, Tiffany. You chose to latch onto a terrible man. You chose to indulge in the suffering of others. Now you have to pay the price for that choice. The law is fair. The person who does the crime does the time. I have no obligation, and absolutely no reason, to get involved in your garbage. Now I suggest you get off my property before I call the police to have you removed like a piece of trash. Seeing that her pleading had failed, Tiffany's true, shameless nature emerged. She shot up, her eyes wide with hatred. The fake tears were replaced by a sharp, threatening glare. Don't push your luck. You think you're so clean? If you don't help me, I'm going to your new company tomorrow. I'll tell your boss and your colleagues that you're a promiscuous, evil woman who framed her ex-husband. I'll hire people to slander you on every social media group. If I can't live in peace, you won't be able to hold your head up in this city either. Faced with her aggression, I felt no fear. I calmly pulled my smartphone from my pocket and unlocked it. I swiped to a folder of saved images and held it up in front of her face. Tiffany, take a good look. These are screenshots of your messages to 3 other married men before you latched on to Ethan. The chats where you negotiated prices for a night, the flirtatious messages you used for blackmail, all collected by a private investigator I hired when I first suspected Ethan's fidelity. Did you think I would leave empty-handed without any leverage? Your parents in that small town in Ohio are respected retired teachers, right? Just imagine if I printed all of this out and mailed it to their old school, to the head of their community association, and attached it to an email to the company that just fired you. Who do you think won't be able to hold their head up in society then? Tiffany's face went from red to white as a sheet. Her earlier aggression deflated like a punctured balloon. She stumbled back a few steps, her eyes wide with terror, staring at my phone as if it were a demon. Her threats had hit a wall of steel. I don't want to get my hands dirty with people like you, which is why I've kept quiet. But if you dare to threaten me one more time, I will show you what true public disgrace looks like. Now get out of here. Tiffany trembled and stumbled backward, nearly falling over the step. She scrambled to her feet and ran blindly into the pouring rain, disappearing down the narrow alley without a single glance back. I calmly slammed the door shut and engaged all 3 locks. Outside, the storm raged around those who had sown the wind. But inside my small room, everything was warm and peaceful. After the stormy night when I cast the shameless mistress out of my life, I thought I would have a few days of peace. The police were officially involved, and with Ethan in custody, the hornet's nest of his family was in complete disarray. I told myself to focus on my work and stay away from the drama, but I had underestimated the madness of a woman pushed to the edge. That night, the clock struck 2 a.m. The entire apartment complex was deep in sleep after a long day of work. The silence was so profound I could hear the rustle of leaves in the small alley outside. I was deep in a dream when a deafening crash jolted me awake. It was the sound of metal striking my iron security door, a piercing, grating noise. At first, I thought it was a drunk neighbor at the wrong door. But then a shrill, raspy, and terrifying female voice tore through the night. "Grace, you open this door right now. You evil bitch. You sent my son to prison. If you have any guts, come out here and face me. Today, I'm ending this with you." It was Brenda. Her familiar voice, now laced with an overwhelming hatred, made every cell in my body tense up. The banging on the door grew more violent, accompanied by a stream of vulgar curses and the sound of a heavy object, like a bat, striking the iron bars. "Open the door! If you don't, I'll set this whole damn place on fire, and you can burn inside. My life is already over, so you won't get to live in peace either. You've pushed my son and me to the end of our rope." My heart pounded in my chest. Primal fear surged as I faced someone who had clearly lost their mind. This was no longer the arrogant, bossy mother-in-law of the past. This was a cornered animal, ready to do anything for revenge. I tiptoed out of bed, careful not to turn on any lights that might agitate her further. I checked the 3 locks on my door, making sure the deadbolt was secure. I grabbed my phone, switched on the video recorder with the flash off, and held the lens up to the small ventilation window. Through the dim light of the street lamp outside, Brenda's appearance was terrifying. She was in disheveled pajamas, her hair hanging limply over half her face. In her hands, she wielded a large piece of wood, repeatedly smashing it against my door. At her feet was a plastic bottle reeking of gasoline. She was serious about setting a fire. Without a second's hesitation, I dialed 911, reporting an immediate threat to life and an attempted arson. The noise had woken up the neighbors. A few windows cautiously opened, but upon seeing Brenda's frenzied state and the gasoline can, no one dared to intervene. She seemed to notice them and started screaming threats at them, demanding they force me to come out. In less than 5 minutes, the wail of police sirens tore through the quiet night, their flashing red and blue lights painting the weathered walls of the alley. 2 local police officers and neighborhood watch members swarmed in. Brenda was subdued before she could react. The wooden plank was knocked from her hands, and the gasoline can was kicked aside. She struggled violently, biting and scratching, screaming my name with the most venomous curses. The officers had to handcuff her and force her into a patrol car. As the sirens faded, restoring quiet to the complex, I slowly opened my door. The landlord and a few neighbors gathered around, asking if I was okay. I apologized for disrupting their sleep and briefly explained the situation to calm their fears. Back in my room, I sank to the cold floor. Even though I had prepared for the worst, the sheer malice of that family still sent shivers down my spine. But at the same time, I felt a powerful sense of finality. The video on my phone and the arrest report from tonight would be a fitting punishment, forever severing my ties with those inhuman people. The next morning, I requested a few hours off from work to handle a personal matter. I brought my phone with the video of Brenda's attack, along with my entire divorce file, to the local police precinct. Mr. Miller was already waiting for me. His calm professionalism was a steady anchor in these turbulent legal waters. The desk sergeant informed us that Brenda had been cited for 2 serious offenses: disturbing the public peace and threatening the life and property of a citizen. Due to the presence of a weapon and a flammable liquid, the case was deemed complex, and she was being held for further investigation. Mr. Miller filed a request for a restraining order against Brenda and her entire family. He also officially filed a civil lawsuit, demanding compensation for the damage to my reputation, dignity, and emotional distress caused by her slander and harassment. The evidence I provided was overwhelming. The case officer quickly accepted the file and promised a thorough investigation. While waiting to finalize the paperwork, I overheard two detectives discussing the fraud case involving the investment company. Ethan's name came up several times. It turned out my ex-husband's situation in jail was even more pathetic than I could have imagined. Accustomed to a life of ease and luxury funded by others, Ethan had completely broken down behind bars. The detective mentioned that during his first interrogation, Ethan had sobbed like a child. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by cowardly finger-pointing. He claimed his mother had forced him into everything. He said Brenda's greed for commissions had pushed him into forging the documents. He accepted no personal responsibility. Not only did he throw his own mother under the bus, but he also furiously cursed his mistress, Tiffany. He told the investigators that Tiffany was a curse, a gold digger who had convinced him to leave his wife, bringing nothing but bad luck to his family. He begged the police to let him meet me, hoping I would pay restitution on his behalf to reduce his sentence. Hearing this, I could only shake my head in disgust. A man so disloyal and irresponsible to the very end. In good times, he would trample his loyal wife for a mistress. In bad times, he would push his mother towards ruin, curse his lover, and shamelessly beg his ex-wife to save him. That person no longer had any right to exist in my mind for even a second. Stepping out of the police station, the bright morning sun hit my face, warm and brilliant. Mr. Miller patted my shoulder encouragingly. He assured me that with the restraining order and the strong intervention of the law, that family would have no more chances to bother me. I expressed my sincere gratitude to my dedicated lawyer and hailed a cab to work. The dark clouds of the past had finally been blown away. I took a deep breath of the crisp Chicago autumn air and walked into my office, ready to start a new day with a completely new mindset. Nearly a month passed since that chaotic night. My life settled into a stable rhythm. My work at the media company was going exceptionally well. My performance was highly praised, and I was officially promoted to design team lead ahead of schedule. My new colleagues were supportive and open-minded, creating a professional environment that helped me completely shed the stigma of being a recently divorced woman. On weekends, instead of cooping myself up in my apartment, I joined a hiking club to improve my health and expand my social circle. It was there that I met Leo. He was an IT engineer for a multinational corporation. Leo didn't have Ethan's polished, flashy appearance. He had a rugged, steady, and incredibly warm presence. His subtle acts of kindness, helping me with my heavy backpack on steep trails or offering me a water bottle just when I was getting tired, made me feel a strange sense of peace. We became close friends, frequently texting about work and life. One Friday afternoon, I was at a coffee shop with Leo, planning our next hiking trip, when my phone rang, an unknown number. Out of cautious habit, I excused myself and walked to a quiet corner of the cafe before answering. "Hello, I'm listening." The line was silent for a few seconds, followed by heavy breathing. Then, a low, raspy male voice spoke. "Grace, it's Ethan." A chill ran down my spine, and my muscles tensed. I gripped the phone, focusing intently to analyze the situation. Ethan was supposed to be in jail, awaiting trial. How could he be calling me? "Hello. What is it?" Ethan's voice dropped, filled with a fake, sorrowful tone, trying to appeal to any lingering sentiment. "My family posted bail. I'm out on house arrest until the trial because of my acute gastritis. Grace, I've had a lot of time to think in there. I know I was wrong. I am so sorry. Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Tiffany is gone, disappeared. My mom is under observation at a psychiatric facility. I've lost everything. Can we meet this afternoon? Just for a little while. I just want to apologize to you in person." I frowned, my mind quickly dissecting his words and tone. On the surface, it was a desperate plea, but I could hear a subtle, resentful edge in his voice. A selfish, cowardly man like Ethan would never suddenly see the light and admit his faults. His release on bail was a dangerous variable. His attempt to contact me was surely part of some dark scheme. Ethan, I think there's nothing left for us to talk about. The court has made its decision, and the law is taking its course. Save your apologies for the judge. The restraining order is still in effect. If you try to meet me, I will immediately report you to the police, and you will forfeit your bail. Goodbye. I hung up decisively, giving him no chance to say another word. I immediately messaged Mr. Miller to inform him of the situation. He replied quickly, warning me not to meet Ethan under any circumstances, to avoid walking alone at night, and to keep my phone ready for an emergency call. Returning to the table, Leo noticed my pale face and asked with concern. I just smiled faintly, saying it was a wrong number. I wasn't ready to tell him about the messy baggage of my past. I was afraid its filth would taint the clean slate of our budding relationship. Although I reassured myself that the law would protect me, deep down, I knew the final storm, named Ethan, was quietly approaching. Work at the media company became increasingly hectic as the year-end approached. A flood of event design projects meant I often worked late into the evening. On a midweek day, a cold front had swept through Chicago, bringing a biting winter wind. I finished my last design, shut down my computer, and put on my thick winter coat. It was already 9 p.m. The streets were sparsely populated. I walked towards the bus stop. About a 5-minute walk from the office. The pale yellow light from the street lamps cast long shadows on the damp pavement, creating a dreary scene. The bus stop was empty. I pulled my collar up and scanned the deserted road for the late-night bus. Suddenly, a black SUV with its headlights off pulled up and stopped right at the curb, less than 6 feet from where I stood. A woman's instinct for self-preservation kicked in. I took a few steps back, my hand slipping into my coat pocket, gripping the small can of pepper spray I always carried. The rear door of the SUV flew open. 2 large men in black hoodies and face masks jumped out like shadows. They came straight for me. "Grab her and get her in the car, quick," one of them growled. Everything happened in a flash. The first man lunged, reaching for my coat. I dodged sideways and sprayed the pepper spray directly into his face. He screamed in pain, clutching his eyes, but the second man was already on me from behind. He wrapped a muscular arm around my neck, his other hand trying to cover my mouth. The feeling of suffocation was immediate, the foul stench of stale cigarettes from his clothes filling my nostrils. I struggled violently, using my handbag with its metal buckle to repeatedly hit his head and shoulder. I screamed for help with all my remaining strength. "Help me! Kidnapping! Help!" The man cursed and dragged me towards the open car door. In the struggle, my heel caught the edge of the curb, and my ankle twisted sharply. A searing pain shot up my leg, causing me to collapse, but I held onto the bus stop signpost with a death grip. At that very moment, the bright headlights of a police patrol car on its nightly route illuminated the bus stop. The distinct wail of its siren pierced the air. The officers, spotting the struggle, immediately accelerated towards us. "Cops! Let her go! Run!" The driver of the SUV yelled in panic. The man holding me released his grip, shoving me hard to the ground. The 2 masked men scrambled back into the car, slamming the door. The SUV lurched over the curb and sped off into the night. I lay on the cold pavement, clutching my swollen ankle, gasping for breath. The 2 police officers quickly got out of their car. One rushed to help me up while the other used his radio to call for backup, relaying the vehicle's description and requesting roadblocks. They took me in their patrol car to the nearest hospital to check my injuries and take an initial statement. The horrifying nightmare had just brushed against the edge of life and death. The injury to my ankle was just a sprain. The doctor put it in a brace and prescribed painkillers. That night, I was taken to the district police station for a formal interview. Despite the pain and exhaustion, my mind was surprisingly clear. I provided a detailed account of the incident, including the prior threats from Ethan's family and his strange phone call from the previous week. The long arm of the law works in mysterious ways. Although the kidnappers had used tape to obscure the license plate, the extensive network of security cameras throughout Chicago quickly traced their route. A coordinated effort by detectives and patrol units set up a perimeter and apprehended all 3 suspects on the interstate as they tried to flee the city. By dawn, the chilling truth behind the kidnapping plot was revealed through the suspects' confessions. The thugs admitted they were hired muscle from the city outskirts. The man who hired them was a low-life criminal, a former cellmate of Ethan's during his short time in jail. Bitter about being exposed by me and desperate to escape the massive debt, Ethan had concocted a deranged plan. He sold his last remaining luxury watch for a few $1,000s and paid the gang to kidnap me. His plan was brutal. They were to take me to an abandoned warehouse, use violence and psychological torture to force me to record a video confession, taking all the blame. He wanted to force me to sign a forged document he had prepared, stating that I would voluntarily assume the entire $250,000 debt in exchange for my life. Reading the summary of the confession provided by the lead detective, a cold dread washed over me. The man I had shared a bed with for 5 years had turned into a vicious monster. He had lost all humanity, driven by the primal instincts of a cornered animal. With sufficient evidence, a special task force was immediately dispatched to Ethan's temporary residence. They kicked down the door to find him packing a bag, about to flee. He was apprehended on the spot. This time, there would be no leniency. He was arrested, and the cold steel of handcuffs locked around his wrists, ending his brief period of freedom. Violating his bail conditions, on top of masterminding a kidnapping for extortion and threatening a person's life, meant Ethan would face an extremely severe criminal sentence, one charge piled on top of another. I sat in the waiting room of the police station, watching the first rays of morning sun stream through the window. The pain in my ankle was a dull throb, but the invisible weight that had been pressing down on my mind for months had finally lifted. Justice had been served. All of Ethan's despicable plots had been crushed by the law. From that moment on, I knew I was truly safe. The sky outside was a brilliant blue, and my life was beginning to welcome its own radiant dawn. The ankle injury forced me to take a few days off work to recover. During this time, I mostly stayed in my apartment, turning off all social media notifications to let my mind rest after the terrifying kidnapping attempt. Ethan's case was being fast-tracked by the district attorney's office. I thought the chaotic chapter of my life was finally closed until another call from the police came one late afternoon. The detective in charge of the case requested that I come to the station immediately to help clarify a new development. A bad feeling told me it was related to the lingering remnants of Ethan's family. I pushed through the pain, hailed a cab, and went directly to the station. In the brightly lit interrogation room, the detective placed a photocopy of a handwritten letter in front of me. The blue ink was messy and trembling, with a yellowish stain in the top corner, like a fallen tear. The detective, in a calm voice, delivered another shocking piece of news. Yesterday afternoon, Tiffany had overdosed on a large quantity of sleeping pills in the dilapidated room she had rented after being evicted from her condo. Fortunately, her landlady, who had come to collect rent, noticed something was wrong. When Tiffany didn't answer the door, she had someone break the lock and rushed her to the hospital in time to have her stomach pumped. She was out of danger but was under close observation. The letter on the table was a suicide note she had left behind. The contents were aimed directly at me. The detective asked me to read it carefully and provide a response, as it contained accusations that I had mentally abused her and driven her to this point. I picked up the letter and scanned the lines filled with blind hatred. Tiffany wrote that her life had become a tragedy entirely because of my cruelty and ruthlessness. She blamed me for mercilessly posting evidence on social media, causing her to lose her job and reputation. She resented me for cruelly sending Ethan to prison, leaving her without her only support system while loan sharks hounded her. At the end of the letter, she used cursing words, saying that her death would become a guilty conscience that would haunt me for the rest of my life. After reading the letter, I felt no fear or guilt. Instead, I felt a mixture of pity and utter contempt for a woman with a parasitic mentality. I gently placed the letter back on the table and looked the detective straight in the eye. My demeanor was one of absolute composure, of someone who understands both morality and the law. "Officer, I've read it. I would like to state for the record that I bear absolutely no legal or moral responsibility for Miss Tiffany's reckless actions. This letter is nothing more than the final excuse of someone who refuses to face the consequences of her own choices. The detective nodded slightly, signaling me to continue. I systematically dismantled her baseless accusations. First, the loss of her reputation and job was not my doing. It was the inevitable consequence of her choice to interfere in and destroy another person's marriage, a serious violation of basic decency. Second, the person who put Ethan in prison was his mother's greed and his own moral decay in committing fraud. I was the victim who was betrayed, robbed of marital assets, and nearly murdered by hired thugs. I only exercised my legal right to self-defense to protect my honor and safety. Tiffany's suicide attempt is a personal tragedy resulting from her inability to handle the pressure from her creditors, and it was not caused by any coercion or threats from me. The detective carefully recorded my statement. He explained that they had only called me in to complete the procedure and gather objective information. Because the letter mentioned my name, the police had already confirmed that the primary cause of her actions was the intense pressure from debt collectors. The law is fair and transparent. No one can use death to blackmail or falsely accuse an innocent person. I signed the statement and walked out of the police station as the city lights began to twinkle. The cold wind on my face cleared my head. The other woman's suicide note was like a stone thrown into a still lake, causing a few ripples before sinking to the bottom. I told myself that kindness must be directed appropriately. For those who use feigned weakness to manipulate others, a cold refusal is the most humane response. I took a cab back to my small apartment, closing the chapter named Tiffany Forever. Time flew by. The harsh winter gave way to the warm sunshine of spring. My ankle fully healed. My career at the media company provided a stable income and a position I was proud of. The troubles with my ex-husband's family seemed to fade into the distant past as the wheels of justice turned. That morning, I took the day off to attend the criminal trial for Ethan and the pyramid scheme. The courtroom of the city's Superior Court was solemn and packed with attendees, most of them victims who had lost their life savings to the scam. I chose a seat in a quiet corner at the back, silently observing the scene. A police van pulled up outside. The bailiffs escorted the defendants to the stand. When I saw Ethan, I almost didn't recognize the man I had once been married to. He was gaunt, his cheekbones sharp and pronounced, his head shaved, revealing a haggard face filled with fear. He wore a standard prison jumpsuit. He kept his head down, his hands clasped and trembling before the furious glares of the dozens of victims seated in the gallery. The arrogant, pseudo-intellectual demeanor of the project manager was gone, replaced by the pathetic figure of a criminal awaiting his fate. The trial was tense and lasted the entire day. The prosecutor presented the indictment with irrefutable evidence. Ethan was charged with multiple serious felonies: forgery of official documents to aid his mother in committing fraud, conspiracy to commit assault, and disturbing the public peace for his role in hiring thugs to kidnap and extort me. Faced with the clear evidence from the gangster's confessions and security camera footage, Ethan couldn't deny anything. He just sobbed and begged the court for leniency. As for Brenda, her fate was no less tragic. According to the investigation report presented in court, the severe emotional shock of losing all her assets and seeing her son imprisoned had caused her to develop severe delusional paranoia. A psychiatric evaluation confirmed she had lost the capacity to understand her actions. Consequently, the authorities decided to suspend criminal proceedings against her and commit her to a secure psychiatric facility for mandatory treatment. The loan sharks had to swallow their losses, as the family was now completely bankrupt with no assets to seize. Late in the afternoon, the judge delivered the verdict. Ethan was sentenced to a consolidated term of 15 years in prison for all his crimes. The sound of the gavel striking the bench was a final, decisive end to the life of a man who had trampled on morality and the law. A wave of relief and applause rippled through the gallery from the victims. I quietly stood up and left the courtroom before the bailiffs led Ethan away. There was no joy, no pity. In my heart, there was only a vast, profound silence. Justice had been served. Karma had delivered its verdict. That evening, I sat at my desk in my apartment. I opened my laptop and navigated to the hidden folder named Evidence. It contained all the audio recordings, screenshots, and transaction records from my 5 years of marriage. I selected the entire folder and decisively hit Permanently Delete. The progress bar reached 100%, erasing the last digital ties that connected me to that rotten family. My phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Leo. His warm voice brought a sense of peace. He asked if I had eaten dinner and suggested a walk that weekend. I smiled, a genuine, radiant smile from the bottom of my heart. I agreed without hesitation. The dark past was locked away behind me. I was ready to open my heart to the good things and sincere affection that Leo brought into my life. More than a year after the trial, my life was like a new, vibrant, and flourishing garden. Leo and I were officially a couple. Our love wasn't loud or flashy on social media. It grew from mutual understanding and sincere care in small, everyday actions. Leo was a mature, attentive man who always respected my personal space. With my career advancing and a year-end bonus, combined with my savings, I took out a small mortgage and bought a cozy little condo. The dream of owning a home that was truly mine had finally come true. That weekend, Leo took me to a contemporary art exhibition at the city's art museum. The gallery was quiet, filled with soft, warm light and classical music. I linked my arm with Leo's, slowly walking past large canvases, immersing myself in the beautiful colors. Happiness seeped into every breath. I thought the stormy days were buried forever in the past. But fate, it seems, always tests you when you feel most at peace. While I was admiring a still life painting, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Mr. Miller's name. He rarely called on a weekend. A sense of urgency told me something was wrong. I excused myself and went to a quiet hallway to answer. "Hello, Mr. Miller, it's Grace." His voice on the other end was urgent and breathless. "Grace, listen to me carefully. It's an emergency. Brenda just escaped from the social care center." My ears rang, and a cold dread washed over me. I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "How is that possible? Wasn't she under mandatory treatment? I thought she was in a secure psychiatric hospital," Mr. Miller quickly explained. After Ethan went to prison, Jess was evicted from her condo by creditors and was living in a cheap rental. Unable to afford the high costs of the state psychiatric hospital, Jess had petitioned to take custody of her mother, only to secretly dump her in a homeless shelter on the outskirts of the city to absolve herself of responsibility. Early this morning, during a shift change, Brenda had slipped out through a back fence. The most terrifying part was that the staff found a hidden photograph of me under her bed. My face in the photo was scratched out with red ink. Other patients reported that she had been sleepless for nights, muttering to herself in a dark corner, repeatedly mentioning my name, and vowing to settle a blood debt. Mr. Miller's tone was grave. "I've already notified the police, and they've issued a search alert. However, a delusional person with a vengeful mindset is extremely unpredictable. Where are you right now? Find a safe place, somewhere with good security, and do not go back to your old apartment or wander around alone." I hung up, my body shaking uncontrollably. The panic from the past rushed back, squeezing my heart. The image of the crazed mother-in-law with a bat and a can of gasoline reappeared vividly in my mind. I leaned against the cool marble wall of the museum, the air around me feeling thick and suffocating. The beautiful landscape painting in front of me blurred, replaced by a terrifying vision of a danger lurking in the shadows. I stood frozen in the museum hallway, my palms slick with cold sweat. Just as my mind was succumbing to panic, a warm, steady hand gently touched my shoulder. I flinched and turned. It was Leo. He looked at me with deep concern, immediately noticing the drastic change in my expression. "Grace, what's wrong? What happened? You look so pale." Looking into Leo's sincere eyes, the strong facade I had so carefully built crumbled. I didn't want to hide anything from him anymore. I had to tell him everything, even if it meant he would be scared and leave me. I took a deep breath and, in a trembling voice, recounted the phone call from Mr. Miller and the threat from my mentally ill ex-mother-in-law. After hearing the story, Leo showed no sign of fear or judgment. His face hardened with the determination of a man ready to protect the woman he loved. He didn't ask any prying questions about my past. He just took my hand firmly. "We're leaving right now. You are not going back to your old place, and you are not going to your new condo yet. The security system isn't fully installed. I'm taking you to my apartment. It has 3 layers of security. No one gets in without a key card. Come with me." His decisiveness was incredibly reassuring. On the way, I sat quietly in the passenger seat. When we arrived at his high-rise apartment, he securely locked the door, drew the blinds, and poured me a glass of warm water. Sitting on the soft sofa, enveloped in the safety of his home, I finally let it all out. I told him about the 5 years of misery, the exploitation, Ethan's betrayal, the $250,000 debt, and the night I was almost kidnapped. I cried as I spoke, the tears I had held back for so long finally flowing freely. I was afraid that after hearing about such a dark and troubled past, he would find me to be too much trouble. But Leo didn't judge. He just listened silently. When I finished, he moved closer and gently wiped the tears from my cheeks. He wrapped his arms around me in a tight, warm, and steady embrace. "Grace, you've been through too much. From now on, you won't have to fight alone anymore. I will stop any storm from reaching you. You just need to live a happy and peaceful life with me. I promise I will always be your shield." That night, I fell asleep on the sofa in Leo's arms. The next morning, a phone call from Mr. Miller woke me. The news he delivered lifted the heavy stone from my chest. The police had found Brenda at dawn. She was wandering aimlessly, with complete amnesia, at a bus station on the far outskirts of the city. Her clothes were filthy, and she was muttering incoherently. The stress of the escape had likely triggered a complete psychotic break. The local police had handed her over to a high-security state mental hospital under legal supervision. The final, lingering threat from my ex-husband's family was officially neutralized. I smiled in relief, looking at the bright sun shining through the window of Leo's home. It was truly over. Time passed, and the law of cause and effect dealt its hand to each member of that wicked family. Brenda remained confined to the walls of the state psychiatric hospital, living out her days in a fog of insanity. Jess, the once pampered princess, was hit hard by life. Unemployed and ostracized by relatives, she ended up working as a stalker at a discount supermarket, working long hours for minimum wage and living in a rundown rental. As for Tiffany, her dream of a lavish life shattered. After her suicide attempt, she was kicked out of her rental. Her parents dragged her back to their small town, forcing her into an arranged marriage with a widower 20 years her senior to use the dowry money to pay off her debts. Those who had sown the wind reaped the whirlwind. As for me, the brightest days of my youth were just beginning. My new condo was finally finished. Leo designed the lighting system and bought all the appliances as a housewarming gift. He even installed a state-of-the-art security system. On moving day, the weather was beautiful. Leo and I unpacked and decorated together. The apartment, though small, was filled with sunlight and warmth. That evening, I cooked a celebratory dinner for him. We sat at a small table by the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the sparkling city lights. When dinner was over, Leo brought out 2 cups of hot tea. He looked at me with a deep, serious gaze. Then, he stood up, walked over to my side, and knelt on one knee. From his pocket, he took out a small, red velvet box. Inside was a beautiful, sparkling diamond ring. "Grace, watching you overcome so much has made me admire and love you even more. This house is beautiful, but it would be perfect with a man who is always here to support you. Will you marry me? Let me take care of you for the rest of our lives." Tears streamed down my face, but this time, they were tears of pure joy. All the bitterness, all the sacrifice, and all the courage it took to rise from the mud had finally been rewarded. I extended my trembling hand and nodded, a radiant smile on my face. Leo slid the ring onto my finger and pulled me into his arms. We stood together, watching the vibrant city below. I rested my head on his shoulder, taking a deep breath, feeling a sense of complete and utter peace. A new chapter, full of freedom, brilliance, and love, was officially opening before me. The weak, submissive Grace was gone, replaced by a strong, confident woman who held her own happiness in her hands.